In 1945, in Berlin, Adolf Hitler died. Many members of his party died, and most importantly, the ideology of fascism was slaughtered by the communist Russians and the democratic Americans. This is important and the most significant outcome of the war. Had the Nazis won, or at least held out for a bit longer, the ideology could have been legitimized, like democracy and communism, but it wasn't. It's gone, and no candidate in American history or European history can ever run as an outright fascist. And while many people associate a new type of political ideology with fascism, it's quite different. Far-right populism, which involves a candidate that goes against the mainstream on the right side of the political spectrum. It's sweeping the world like wildfire, and it's quite popular, yet a far-right candidate, Norbert Hofer, in the Austrian presidential elections, lost. So ask the question, what is significant about Austria's presidential election? Well, the answer is not much, because far-right populism as an ideology has already been legitimized far across the world. And we can see this in three very different and unique cases: the United States, mainstream media, and the continent of Europe. There's no question that the election of Donald Trump to the President of the United States was a historic event, because he was so different from any president that came before him. And it's not just significant for America, it's significant for Europe as well. As according to a November 11th issue of the New York Times, many of these far-right populist groups in Austria, including Norbert Hofer, were inspired by Donald Trump. And him getting elected to President of the United States only legitimizes this system of beliefs even more. Trump was right-wing, but he wasn't really a Republican. He was considered a man of the people. And that's what many leaders in Europe are trying to be considered as well. They want to make their countries great again, just like in the United States. That's what Norbert Hofer was trying to do, and that's what's going on in Norway, Sweden, Britain, France, the Netherlands, Hungary, Poland, Serbia. The list goes on. And according to a November 9th issue of the BBC, Trump's election wasn't just a victory for many Americans, it was a victory for Europe. Trump's election ties right into the events in Austria and the rest of Europe, because the idea of far-right populism may have lost in Austria, but it is not lost in the rest of the world. And this can be seen in another case, as bizarre as it sounds, the mainstream media. A key point of far-right populism in Donald Trump and Norbert Hofer's campaigns was the sort of government boogeyman that's ruining everybody's lives and is tied in with the media. Much of the media is leftist, and against people like Trump and Norbert Hofer, as according to a November 6th issue of the Huffington Post, which criticized far-right populism. It just proves that the media criticizes far-right populism on a bias almost unfairly, because they don't really give the ideology or the candidates a fair hearing, calling them fascist and Nazis, which we already discussed are gone and can't ever come back. So these candidates use it to their advantage. The media can slander them, bash them, say horrible things about them, even libel them. Yet these candidates push forward with more support than ever. Mainstream media is important to what happened in the United States, Europe, and Austria, because it doesn't act as a deterrent for people voting for the far right. In fact, it acts as a catalyst. This can be shown here in the United States, as according to a November 10th issue of Reuters, the millions of dollars of anti-Trump ads that Hillary Clinton sent out didn't really affect the election. People who were going to vote for Trump voted for him anyway, and the ads really just made them angry and like the guy even more. That's what happened in Austria, though on this occasion, the far-right lost. But it's going on in France and the Netherlands, and these ads are only getting their respective far-right candidates even more support, which may be good or bad for Europe, but very good for the ideology, because the more the media hates them, and hate them they do, the more support the far-right gets. And that's very important. It happened here in the United States, and it's happening in Europe, because despite what the media is saying, the far-right is ever growing in Europe. It lost in Austria, but that seems to be an isolated event, as a December 2nd issue of CNN called Far-Right Ideology, Trendy, Hip, and Ever So Popular in Europe. It's only gaining in popularity, and it will continue to, because their support only gets bigger in countries like Hungary, Poland, the Netherlands, France, Italy, and Serbia, as according to a November 29th issue of the Washington Post, far-right parties in the Balkans like Greece have gotten unexpected support in the past few months, including the Jewish minorities, which wouldn't have helped sway the election in Austria and probably won't anywhere else, but it just shows that they're not Nazis in the eyes of millions of people. Their ideology is legitimate, and it will only continue to grow despite what happened in Austria. So Austria's election was a big slap in the face for far-right populism, but it's not by any means the end. As we can see, the ideology is already legitimized and continuing to grow. We can see it in the United States with the election of Donald Trump, in the mainstream media and how it only adds a catalyst to these beliefs, and in Europe, as we see far-right parties spring up across the continent and only get more popular. Not only did Adolf Hitler die in 1945, his ideology died as well. It was destroyed. If Hitler had held out for a bit longer, or maybe even won the war, even if the Nazi Party declined after that, fascism still would have been delegitimized. Democracy in the United States is a staple. The Constitution is what allows all of our candidates to be politicians, and no candidate can run for office without supporting the Constitution, because it is legitimized. It's the same thing with far-right populism. It's realistic, and it's happening across the world. It's not fascism, that's dead. It's not National Socialism, that is dead as well. It's something new entirely, and it's only growing in popularity. So even if it lost in Austria, only the next few decades will tell what the world has in store for far-right populism.